Subscribe to Wild West Soul Stories. Hit the bell, like, comment, and share. Thanks for watching. The autumn wind carried the scent of sage and dust across the Montana plains as Elijah Tanner rode his weary horse toward the small ranch nestled between two gentle hills. He had been traveling for 3 weeks, moving from town to town, looking for work that would keep his hands busy and his mind quiet. The war had taken everything from him: his brother, his family farm, and the woman he had once promised to marry. Now, at 32 years old, he was nothing more than a wandering soul searching for a place that might feel like home again. The sign at the entrance of the property read Whitfield Ranch in faded white letters. Elijah had heard in the last town that the widow who ran this place was looking for help before winter set in. He needed the work, and she needed the hands. It seemed like a simple arrangement, the kind that required nothing more than hard labor and honest pay. As he approached the main house, a woman stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. She had dark auburn hair pulled back in a simple braid, and her eyes were the color of honey touched by sunlight. She looked to be perhaps 28 or 29, with the kind of quiet beauty that didn't demand attention but earned it nonetheless. "You must be the man looking for work," she said, her voice carrying a warmth that surprised him. Elijah removed his hat and held it against his chest. "Yes, ma'am. Name's Elijah Tanner. I heard you might need some help around here." "I'm Rosemary Whitfield. My husband passed 2 years ago, and I've been running this place with what little help I can find. The last hand left a month ago to chase gold in California." She studied him for a moment, her gaze taking in the worn leather of his boots and the tired lines around his eyes. "You look like a man who knows hard work." "I do, ma'am. I grew up on a farm in Virginia. I know cattle, horses, and I can fix just about anything that needs fixing." She nodded slowly. "There's a small cabin behind the barn. It's not much, but it's warm and dry. Pay is $20 a month plus meals. You can start tomorrow." Elijah felt something loosen in his chest. Relief, perhaps, or maybe just the simple comfort of knowing he would have a roof over his head for a while. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitfield. I won't let you down. Just call me Rosemary," she said, a small smile touching her lips. "Mrs. Whitfield makes me feel older than I am." The first few weeks passed in a rhythm of honest work. Elijah repaired fences, tended to the cattle, and chopped enough wood to last through the coming winter. He kept to himself mostly, eating his meals alone in the cabin and speaking to Rosemary only when necessary. He was not unfriendly, but something in him had closed off after the war, like a door that had been shut and locked for too long. Rosemary noticed his silence but did not push him. She understood grief in ways that needed no explanation. Her own husband, Thomas, had been a good man who died from a fever that swept through the territory without warning. She had spent 2 years learning how to live with the emptiness he left behind, and she recognized that same emptiness in Elijah's eyes. One evening in late October, the first snow of the season began to fall. Elijah was walking back from the barn when he saw Rosemary standing on her porch, looking up at the white flakes drifting down from the darkening sky. There was something so peaceful in that moment, something that made him stop and watch her without meaning to. She turned and caught him looking. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said. "It is," he replied, though he wasn't entirely sure if he meant the snow. "Elijah, I was wondering if you might join me for dinner tonight. Inside the house, I mean. It seems foolish for us to eat alone when there's a storm coming." He hesitated. In all his weeks at the ranch, he had never entered the main house. There was a boundary there, an invisible line that felt important to maintain. But the snow was falling harder now, and there was something in her voice, a loneliness that echoed his own, that made it impossible to refuse. "I'd be honored, Rosemary." The inside of the house was warm and filled with the smell of roasting meat and fresh bread. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the wooden floors. The table was set for 2, with candles lit at the center and wildflowers arranged in a simple glass jar. Elijah stood in the doorway, taking it all in. You didn't have to go to all this trouble. Rosemary smiled as she carried a pot from the kitchen. It's no trouble. I like cooking, and it's nice to have someone to cook for again. They sat across from each other, and she served him a plate of roasted chicken, potatoes, and vegetables from her garden. The food was better than anything he had eaten in years. And he told her so. My mother taught me, she said. She always believed that a good meal could heal almost anything. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. Rosemary's eyes grew distant for a moment. She passed before Thomas and I were married. I think she would have liked you, though. She always said she could judge a man by how he treated animals and whether he said please and thank you. Elijah chuckled softly. My mother used to say something similar. She believed that a person's character showed in the small things they talked through, the meal, their conversation flowing more easily than either of them had expected. Rosemary told him about growing up in Missouri, about how she had met Thomas at a church picnic and known within a month that she would marry him. Elijah shared pieces of his own past, the farm in Virginia, his younger brother who had died at Antietam, the woman named Catherine who had returned his ring after the war because she said he had come back as some. One she no longer recognized. I'm sorry, Rosemary said quietly. That must have been painful. It was. But I think she was right. I wasn't the same man who left. The war changed something in me, and I haven't been able to find my way back to who I was before. Rosemary reached across the table and touched his hand. The contact was gentle, almost tentative, but it sent a warmth through him that he hadn't felt in years. Maybe you're not supposed to go back, she said. Maybe you're supposed to become someone new. After dinner, they sat by the fire, and Rosemary poured them each a cup of coffee. The storm raged outside, but inside the house, there was only the soft crackling of flames and the quiet comfort of shared company. Elijah looked around the room, noticing the small details he had missed before. A vase of dried lavender on the mantel, a quilt draped over the back of a chair, a book of poetry lying open on the side table. You made dinner for two, he said suddenly, the realization settling over him. And you said it would be just you and me. Rosemary's cheeks flushed slightly. I did. He met her eyes, his heart beating faster than it had in years. Rosemary, is this a date? She was quiet for a moment, and he worried that he had overstepped, but then she smiled, and it was like watching the sun rise over the mountains. Would it be so terrible if it was? Elijah set down his coffee cup and leaned forward. No, it wouldn't be terrible at all. I just want to make sure I understand what's happening here. What's happening, she said softly, is that I've spent 2 years alone in this house, missing my husband and wondering if I would ever feel anything again. And then you came here, and something changed. I found myself looking forward to seeing you every morning. I found myself thinking about you when I should have been thinking about 100 other things. Rosemary, let me finish. She took a deep breath. I know I'm being forward. Now, this isn't how things are supposed to be done. But life is short, Elijah. I've learned that lesson the hard way. And I didn't want to waste any more time pretending I don't feel something for you. The fire popped and crackled as silence stretched between them. Elijah felt as though he was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into something vast and unknown. He had spent so long running from his past, from his pain, from the possibility of feeling anything at all. But sitting here with Rosemary, in this warm house while the snow fell outside, he realized that running had only led him in circles. I've been afraid, he admitted. After Catherine, after everything, I told myself I would never let anyone close again. It seemed easier that way. Safer. And now? Now I'm not so sure. He reached out and took her hand, holding it gently in both of his. I think about you too, Rosemary. More than I should. More than I meant to. You've made me remember what it feels like to be something other than numb. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. So what do we do now? I don't know. he said honestly. I don't have any answers. I don't even know who I am anymore. But I know that sitting here with you feels right, and I haven't felt that way about anything in a very long time. Rosemary squeezed his hand. That's enough for me. For now, that's enough. The weeks that followed brought the deepest winter the territory had seen in years. Snow piled in drifts against the barn and covered the hills in endless white. But inside the ranch, there was warmth, not just from the fires that burned in every hearth, but from the growing connection between two people who had found each other when they needed it most. They fell into new patterns. Elijah began eating breakfast and dinner in the main house. They spent evenings reading by the fire, sometimes talking for hours, and sometimes sitting in comfortable silence. He learned that she loved to sing when she thought no. One was listening, that she had a weakness for apple pie, and that she dreamed of seeing the ocean someday. She learned that he carved small figures from wood when his hands needed something to do, that he still woke some nights from dreams of the war, and that beneath his quiet exterior was a man with a heart bigger than he wanted to admit. One night in December, they stood together on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one in the frozen sky. The air was bitterly cold, but neither wanted to go inside. I think I'm falling in love with you, Elijah said, the words coming out before he could stop them. Rosemary turned to him, her breath visible in the cold air. You think? No. He shook his head and took her face gently in his hands. I know. I'm in love with you, Rosemary. I have been for weeks, maybe longer. I was just too scared to admit it. A tear slipped down her cheek, freezing almost instantly in the cold. I love you too, Elijah. I've loved you since the night. You sat at my table and let me see the real you. He kissed her then, there under the winter stars, with the world silent and white around them. It was a kiss that held everything they had been afraid to say, everything they had been afraid to feel. And when they finally pulled apart, both of them knew that nothing would ever be the same. Spring came slowly to Montana that year, arriving in fits and starts that teased the land with warmth before pulling it back. But by April, the snow had melted, and the hills were green with new life. Elijah stood at the fence line, watching the cattle graze in the morning sun. He had put on weight over the winter. His face had lost its haggard look, and there was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Hope, maybe, or simply peace. Rosemary walked up beside him and slipped her arm through his. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking about how strange life is. 6 months ago, I was wandering with no place to go and no reason to stay anywhere. And now. He turned to face her, pulling a small wooden box from his pocket. Her eyes widened as he opened it to reveal a simple gold band that had belonged to his mother. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. He took a deep breath. Rosemary Whitfield, you gave me a home when I had none. You gave me love when I didn't think I deserved it. You saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. His voice caught, and he had to pause before continuing. Will you marry me? Rosemary's hand trembled as she reached for the ring. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Because to him she was. They married in June, in a small ceremony by the creek that ran through the property. A few neighbors attended, along with the preacher from town and his wife. The sun shone bright and warm, and the wildflowers bloomed in brilliant company. Lures along the banks. That night they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over their land, their home, their future. Do you remember the night I asked if it was a date? Elijah said, wrapping his arm around her. Rosemary laughed softly. I remember being terrified that you would say no. I almost did. I almost walked right back out that door and kept running. He kissed the top of her head, but something made me stay. What was it? He thought for a moment. You. It was always you, Rosemary. From the moment I saw you standing on that porch, something in me knew that I had finally found what I'd been searching for." She turned and looked up at him, her eyes filled with love. "And what was that?" "Home," he said simply. "You were my home all along." As the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear, they sat together in peaceful silence, two broken souls who had found healing in each other's arms. The past was behind them now, the grief, the loss, the years of wandering. What lay ahead was unknown, but they would face it together. And in the quiet of that summer evening, with the woman he loved beside him and a future full of promise stretching out before them, Elijah Tanner finally understood that love wasn't just about finding someone to spend your life with. It was about finding someone who made you want to live again.